I'm in New Zealand's sunniest region, Marlborough, to find out how these grapes became a multi-million-dollar export earner, with the help of some celebrity status.
Madison, do you want to try the product?
I probably shouldn't drink on the job.
What sort of job is that? I do it all the time. Here, have some.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We asked Graham if he'd be keen to make a wine with us, and he agreed to do that, but wanted to be involved in the making of it.
And you're still supplying 12 bottles of wine per Graham Norton show today?
Yeah.
Do they pay for it now? Surely.
No, it's a nice little supply agreement, but the commercial terms, I can't go into that. But
we've had 2 years of really tough costs, which have basically been, directly weather dependent, weather the global uncertainty of what's happening out there as well. So we just keep focusing on what we're doing.
Good on you guys. But also in this industry, consumer preferences and behaviour is changing all the time. I mean, the surveys suggest that younger people, even just from conversations, are certainly not drinking as much as they were.
yes, younger people, wine, it's a challenge.
We're so close to being at the critical mass point of tipping that 3% to 4% to 5% when they discover the quality of New Zealand wine and the freshness and enjoyment of Sauvignon Blanc particularly.
We're on our way to Blenheim, courtesy of Air New Zealand, on a typical bluebird day for this world-class winemaking region. So these are Sauvignon Blanc grapes, and I'm allowed to try one, but I was told to spit the skin out, because apparently the skin gives you a hard time later on. Quite sweet. But these vines have too much of a good thing. A huge harvest means there's too much supply, which puts continued pressure on pricing. Last year, the Sauvignon Blanc grape price fell 12% and yield fell 27%, according to the New Zealand Wine Growers Group and the Ministry for Primary Industries, while vineyard working expenses rose 6%. This vineyard supplies Invivo, a winemaking business started by Rob Cameron and Tim Lightbourne, who often go by other names. I hear your nicknames are Twinkle Toes and Crusher. Please explain.
First question, so Twinkle Toes was, back in 2014 when we first partnered with Graham, we picked some grapes and flew them up to London, and I picked the grapes and we filmed it and ran down the vines, and everyone just basically took the mickey out of me running and Twinkle Toes because I was like this. The Crusher.
Do you want a demo for us? You're welcome to.
Open yourself up for that one.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So, and then Crusher for this guy was obviously
What's my job, right?
Cameron, and he crushes grapes, so it worked quite well.
This is the Graham Tim's referring to. You know who he is. They've been in a partnership with the talk show host since 2014. Graham then invested in the company in 2015. Their collaboration wine range has now sold more than 18 million bottles in the UK alone. We'll come back to the story of how they got Graham on board and why. But let's go back to the beginning of Invivo. The name is Latin for within the living. The mates came up with the idea in London and were 1 year into winemaking back home in New Zealand when the global financial crisis hit in 2008. Demand dropped off and grapes in Blenheim were being given away. Despite the tough times early on, they've managed to grow these grapes into a global wine business, raking an annual revenue in the double-digit millions across 43 countries. We're going to get straight into numbers. I know when you raised capital 1.6 mil on Snowball Effect in late 2023, you were targeting for FY24 net revenue of 24 mil and EBITDA earnings of 1.6 mil. Did you get there?
Revenue still in the 20s. EBITDA moves a little bit. But we were, more or less on track to what we forecast for our shareholders. Things move a lot in volume of grapes and supply and all that sort of stuff. But, we're pretty happy with who we've got with our shareholders. We have over 800 shareholders now from 3 crowdfunding campaigns. First one's joined in 2015 and they've been fully supportive. Had a great AGM with our new shareholders from 23. Have about 200 people that come to our AGMs.
The fact that you guys raise money via crowdfunding and Snowball Effect is a little bit of a stunt in itself, right? And I view you two as sort of the king of stunts. The shipping challenges during 2020, you guys took an inflatable boat out to a cargo ship with must have been a handmade sign that said, "Where's our wine?" You're obviously having fun, but there must be something more strategic behind this, whether it's from a brand equity or a marketing leveraging. position? How do you think about these things?
Yeah, look, everything, there's a reason behind everything we do. So it looks stunt if the media cover it. But, if we look at our crowdfunding campaign, the first one, 2015, we had studied the UK market for a couple of years. They launched earlier than New Zealand for crowdfunding, and I had noticed craft beer brands, for example, just firing over there. We had a lot of support around the country, and we had people wanting to invest. So we did a roadshow for about 6 months. We did a big IM, about 60 pages. We basically, it was like listing a company. We did a lot behind the scenes to make it successful. We raised $1 million in the first day. So yes, it's stunty, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes. And then with the shipping, our customers were super frustrated out in the world. They couldn't get wine. And even, Christmas presents into New Zealand were getting stored by all those boats out in the harbour. So we tried to make a bit of a stand for that, which worked as well. So there's always a reason behind why we do the things we do.
But winemaking is not all fun. It's a tough business to be in when costs are increasing and there's major uncontrollables like Mother Nature. Could you perhaps, Rob, talk me through the wine business and why it's worth it if it is an industry where overheads are really, really high?
I mean, overheads are high, sure. Although, the way we've structured our company, we're a very lean operating unit. We do invest a lot into marketing and our brands, but we do it in a very, I think, quite a clever way, which, uses least amount of funds possible. Some of the PR that we get doesn't cost a great deal. It's just kind of tapping into something that can really, relate to people and have a bit of fun. So we kind of stretch our dollar really far. We have, you asked earlier, is it a value or is it a volume game? Well, for us, it's a bit of both. And we have some brands that are more volume focused and some are more value focused. And say in the USA, our positioning there is very much value and premium. And, we get comparatively high GP for a company of our size. We are investing as much as we can back into that market. So, what is the goal? Well, the goal is to, continue to grow the brand to awareness where, eventually some of that investment can back off and you can enjoy some of the profits. Look, it's a challenging business like many different sectors out there. We are exposed to the weather, which is fantastic right now.
It's beautiful today, but not every day.
But, we've had 2 years of really tough costs, which have basically been, directly weather dependent. And so that's really hard because, you get one shot at making your wine, and if you have a bad harvest and your lease blocks or your own blocks are not cropping well, you're stuck with that cost. So we're kind of just moving through 2 years of that into vintage 25, and that's looking fantastic. So look, you've got to weather the ups and the downs in terms of your own production and what that does to your cost base. You've got to weather the global uncertainty of what's happening out there as well. So we just keep focusing on what we're doing.
Good on you guys. But also in this industry, consumer preferences and behaviour is changing all the time. I mean, the surveys suggest that younger people, even just from conversations, are certainly not drinking as much as they were. They're certainly not drinking wine. If you consider other companies like Treasury Wine Estates, which is one of the world's biggest, but based in Australia, they tried to sell off their premium brands. No one was willing to pay enough for it. This is actually, they call it premium, but it's their lower tier, sort of between 10 and 30 bucks for a bottle of wine. What do you make of that? And how do you guys navigate all of the fast-paced changes in this industry and adapt to it?
Yeah, look, with our brands, we try and uncomplicate the wine world, I'd put it. And so 100%. We just do the things we do, try and have a bit of fun. We work with Graham Norton, obviously Sarah Jessica Parker in the US as well. And they're involved in the business, and we do videos and shoot, and obviously the stunts that we do. So I think it attracts a consumer, that's really interested in what we do, younger consumer. Yes, younger people, wine, it's a challenge, but the way that we do things, we definitely have a younger consumer, which is positive. But they'll come back, they'll come into it.
Yeah, 100%. I think in times of when things are not going brilliantly, when you have to work a bit harder and things are tough, we're always looking for sort of reasons, not excuses, but reasons that we can tag, why things are the way they are. And this is a big one at the moment for me is, young people aren't consuming, so therefore, our industry is at threat. I don't really subscribe to that personally. I think that, younger people, they come around, things happen in cycles. We see spirit cycles, which are quite quick. I think this wine cycle is a long one. So I'm pretty confident that, the younger consumer will eventually find wine, because what we do is produce a product that is a natural product. It's from the land. It's amazing. We tell great stories to go with it, and it's compelling to consumers. And when it's ready, when they're ready for it, it's there, and they will jump on. And I don't think in 5 years' time we'll be having the same conversation.
Now they have a new challenge to think about: tariffs. With wine imports into America set to be impacted by the imposed 10% tariff on New Zealand goods. But the pair aren't too concerned and are still going all guns blazing at the US market, where they've partnered with Sarah Jessica Parker. I'm always keen to talk about opportunity, and you are dominating in the UK, thanks to Graham, which we will get to in a moment. Where else is there opportunity around the world? Which markets do you think that you could dominate next?
Well,
list them off.
Dominate. Look, we're working hard in the US, obviously. There's a great opportunity there. New Zealand wine sits 3.6% of the total market, I think, more or less. And there's states where are lower, there's states that are higher. And those states have some of these states have a lot of people. So I think, if we could double our market share, for example, and make
in the States specifically.
In the States, you go from
as a country, as a category,
New Zealand wine, you go from $1 billion to $2 billion just in the States. So that means New Zealand wine being more mainstream over there. That's the opportunity. So we're doing a lot of things in that market to create more awareness with our partner SJP up there. And then, Ireland's good for us. We're in pretty much all the supermarkets over there. Canada, Asia's interesting as well. Japan, we just hosted 12 Koreans last week, and they love New Zealand wine as well. So there's little pockets of opportunities, but particularly in the US.
Fantastic. Rob, you have, correct me if I'm wrong, but made wine across, I'll list them off, Moldova, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Hungary, France, Spain, and Italy. How does New Zealand's winemaking compare with the rest of the world on a cost level, but also how it sells on shelves? What's the secret sauce for our product when it gets in front of people globally?
It's a great question, because 20 years ago, I would have said our winemaking was the thing that set us apart as an industry compared to Europe. But, a lot of my colleagues and myself have spent a lot of time in Europe upping that game. So that's no longer a fact.
Are they Kiwis?
Yeah.
How dare they?
In the 80s and 90s, it was, that's what Kiwi winemakers did, was went to Europe and helped to lift the game and learn from the Europeans as well. So that's no longer a factor. So what sets New Zealand apart is just this place that we live in. The natural, the terroir of New Zealand, Marlborough, Hawke's Bay, Central Otago. That's so unique. The wines that we produce just cannot be replicated, no matter what you do in the winery or in the vineyard. They can't do it in South America. They might say they can, but you line the wines up and they just do not, compare. There's nothing that beats New Zealand wine. So I think it's just the majority of the world's wine market wants to drink fresh, fruit-driven, light wines. That they grow in cool climates and they grow exceptionally well here in New Zealand. So that's our play. Most countries have warmer summers than we do, drinking heavy reds and Chardonnays and things like that. They have a place, but the everyday drink, like Tim was mentioning, like if just the US consumer, we're so close to being at the critical mass point of tipping that 3% to 4% to 5% when they discover the quality of New Zealand wine and the freshness and enjoyment of Sauvignon Blanc particularly. It's really exciting.
You said when you raised capital in late 23, this is a quote from the top of that fundraise bio, "We make wine our mates would drink and we talk about it the same way they would. Honest, down to earth, and without BS." What's the bullshit in the wine industry?
Well, thankfully, I think it's changed a bit and maybe we've been a little bit part of it. But when we were first starting to think about putting this business together, we did a lot of research. We didn't go in, half-cocked. We literally did research and we studied the industry and we kind of we identified what we thought we could improve, what our angle would be. And there was still, in the early 2000s, so much almost like, not talking down to the consumer, but I guess when a young person think about wine, they think about France and they think about, chateaus and all that. And it feels so scary and unrelatable that I think there's this barrier there. We just wanted to bash that down and Kiwiify it.
So we didn't want to pretend to be a brand or a winery that we're not. So two mates, we don't come from family generations of winemaking history and all that sort of stuff. So that's the no BS. Like, we are what we are, and we're not trying to be a chateau or something like that.
I feel like that also fits for Graham Norton, right? Yeah, what you see is what you get. He is just as funny in person as he is on TV. Nice to meet you, Graham.
Very nice to meet you.
The star Graham Norton was with us in Blenheim this day, having lunch with producers from the region. So how did this decade-long deal begin? Tell us the story of how you got Graham Norton to back your brand when, like you say, you didn't have years of family winemaking to back you up. You were just two Kiwi guys wanting to try something different.
Yeah, look, we noticed obviously back in 2011 on the Graham Norton show that every guest was drinking wine on it. So we contacted the show and found out that Graham loves Sauvignon Blanc and said, look, we'll supply Graham our wine for no cost and all the guests on the show. So they said, oh, well, he needs to try it first. And so I sent up some bottles, they tried it, said he loves it. So then we supplied 12 bottles to the show back in 2011. And then Rob and I flew up there. And then suddenly it was all over the New Zealand media at the time. Kiwi Wine Company supplies Graham Norton show. And there was a big photo of Snoop Dogg, I think, because he was the guest on. And
He now has his own wine, 19 grand.
Yeah, it's ironic actually, isn't it?
It is.
So
He wasn't drinking wine that night.
He was on something else. Are you guys going to get into that business next? We'll talk about that later.
So we supplied the show, and it enabled us to sort of say our wine's drunk by these very famous people. And then a few years later, we asked Graham if he'd be keen to make a wine with us, and he agreed to do that, but wanted to be involved in the making of it.
And you're still supplying 12 bottles of wine per Graham Norton show today?
Yeah.
Do they pay for it now? Surely.
No, it's a nice little supply agreement, but the commercial terms, I can't go into that. But
I'm glad there's something with you now. That's fantastic. What would your advice be to other small business owners, not just in New Zealand, but around the world, that are just really trying to get that star power and get that one person on board?
Yeah, I mean, one, that having someone, a talent like that on board is not always the way to go, would be what I would say. But then two, just take a shot at it, right? So, they can only say no.
And I think there's a big part of Kiwi culture that has helped us. We're good at what we do, but the Kiwi nature is, I think, quite approachable. And I think the likes of Graham and SJ, they appreciate the no bullshit, no ego, I think that's helpful. So I think you've got to be yourself. You can have a crack at it. Just be honest, be open, don't try and pretend to be anyone else. I think that's pretty important for life anyway, but these guys, they see through all that sort of stuff. So yeah, but as Tim said, you got to really try and nail what they're going to do for you specifically and communicate that pretty clearly from the early stages of any discussions. Because it's not a simple or easy thing to do, and it can go wrong, and it can be expensive, but it can also go right if you do it right.
Sales of their Graham Norton Sauvignon Blanc are growing at 309% year on year. It's allowed them to increase their winemaking production capacity from 300,000 litres in 2017 to 3 million litres today, proving partnerships, if they're right, can pay off.
It's helped to open a lot of doors with buyers and things. Has reach of their fans, of the followers and all that sort of stuff. But we wanted the key is making it authentic as possible. So every year we sit down with Graham and he blends it through, and he tastes and signs off on it all. So it's not just a name on the label. But where the Rob and Tim show couldn't meet with buyers from large retailers, when we got Graham on board, but not just Graham on board, the way that he worked with us and tasted and was involved in the wine and is hands-on really helped us to, get in the door, but then the wine had to stack up in the quality and all that side of things.
I live by the motto, don't ask, don't get, and you two are the epitome of that. So thanks so much for your time and for having us here, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Markets with Madison. Thanks for watching Markets with Madison. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. I do all of the research for these episodes myself, so your support means a lot. I always love to hear your feedback and ideas, so please drop any thoughts in the comments below. Now go put your money to work.